we're going to start running out of time fairly quickly. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is, again, I've made a few clay balls about the size of a dime. Again, we want to try to keep them relatively consistent. If they're a little bit larger, it's okay, but the idea is that they're all at least very close to being the same. Now, the one issue I saw with a few people is in covering the arm and working on this part. I want you guys to realize that right now what I'm doing is I'm doing the shoulder and the upper arm, the bicep and the tricep. The forearm, we're going to have the hand and the forearm. That's going to be a separate video over there. So that still should be part of the wire sticking out. So you shouldn't really see the whole thing covered here in clay. If you've covered the whole armature with clay, you've done a little bit too much. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to roll out 2 pieces of clay, 2 pieces of dime-sized clay, and I'm going to roll them out so that they take up maybe a little bit less than half of the arm. Remember that, we're going to have to do a forearm, and then we want a little bit of metal that's going to stick out at the end to attach the hand. But what we want is we want to kind of roll 2 pieces of clay out so they are approximately half of that distance, and you can see what mine looks like right there. Next we're going to do is we're just going to flatten them just a little bit. We don't want to make them longer. We do want to make them a little bit wider. So we'll go ahead and do that. And then these two, just like we did on the other side, are going to get sandwiched together around the metal part. Again, that metal, you want to consider that thing is essentially like like the bone in the arm. And you can see that the clay is pretty close to touching the shoulder that we started. And then again, I'm wrapping the 2 pieces around like a hot dog bun around the hot dog. I don't want to extend and stretch this out. I want to leave this bit of clay empty. I do want to wrap this around so I no longer see the wire on the upper part of the arm. And again, just as I've always mentioned, we need to smush that clay together, smooth it out, and get rid of that fold. And again, while you're doing that, lightly rub the clay together to kind of get rid of that fold and smooth it out. But again, don't stretch the clay out longer. We don't want it longer. All right, we'll do that on the front. I'll go ahead and do that on the back. Again, pinching the clay together, trying to blend it in together with my fingertips. Try to keep it relatively even and neat all the way around. If you have to, just kind of reform the clay so that it's not too lumpy around the arm, that it's fairly consistent. This is sort of just like an underlayment of clay that's going to be part of just beefing this arm up a little bit. All right, next thing we're going to do, let's get some bicep and tricep going. So I'll take another piece of clay approximately the size of a dime. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to divide that little ball of clay in half. I'm going to just pinch it in half, roll it back up, make sure both of those are nice, smooth, and even. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to start rolling again. I want to roll this out. This is going to represent the bicep. And again, I only want to kind of roll it out to the same length of the arm over here. So again, I don't want to extend this beyond what's over here. You can see I'm trying to keep it relatively even. If you have parts that look a little lumpy, let's try to even them out. I've got the muscle belly now that I'm going to use for my bicep. And what I'm going to do on the edges, I'm going to just thin the edges out just a little bit. That's going to make this piece just a little bit longer, and those ends are really what we're going to consider like our tendons. But what we want to do is we want to place that bicep that we just created right on top. We want part of that little thin tail that I created to sweep into the chest. Okay, that's the connector for the bicep into the chest, and you'll notice that your chest muscle, your pectoral muscle, really has a lot of ability to move your arm around, move it forward, move it up. The deltoid helps with that as well. And one of the reasons why I could do that is because the tendon is connected from the arm into the chest. It sweeps in. On the other end, you can have that little bit of the extra thin clay sticking out a little bit over. We don't have to mush the bicep totally in so that it's completely blended in, but we do want to kind of make sure it's connected pretty well and it won't kind of just pull off if we accidentally try to take it off. Alright, we got our bicep, and that's, if you've got your body laying down on its back like this, that bicep is on the top looking up, okay? Go to flip over to our back side. I'm going to take that other half of a half and just kind of roll it out. This one I only want to roll to be about half the size, half the length of the bicep. I don't want this one too long. I'm going to go ahead and kind of flatten it out just a little bit. And then what we want to do is we want to kind of flatten one end with my thumb this way, and then flatten the other end this way. So if you look at it, it's kind of like a little flattened here. Here's like the muscle belly, and here's another little sort of almost tendon kind of connector that we have going on. And again, that tendon and connector, we want that to kind of connect that arm to the back here. I'm going to kind of blend that in a little bit. And then that little bump here, that flattened out part, that's going to be sort of blended into the middle of the upper arm. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing to the tricep that I did the bicep. We'll look at it from another angle. You could see what that looks like. I'll try to position this a little bit so you can see. So the nice long bicep, the shorter tricep. Again, not fully blended into the body, but the tendon areas, the bottoms and the tops should be. Alright, so we've got the upper part of the arm. We're working on our character right over here. Again, you want to keep in mind, you should have a good portion of the wire sticking out on both ends. That is going to be, ultimately, where we add the forearm to. Alright. Just kind of adjust this a little bit. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a piece of clay, and we're going to work on the pectoral muscle. We have the pectoral on the left side, we want it on the right side. We're going to start by slowly flattening out that little piece of dime-sized clay. And we want to get approximately, we want symmetry, we want to be approximately the same size. As we start getting towards the same size, what we want to do is kind of pick down the inside part. We want this to get a little bit of a right angle almost. Not perfect, but we want to kind of make sure that the center part, which is going to line up on the center of the body, okay, that it kind of has that sort of feel. It'll fit in like a puzzle piece. We don't want to make it geometric, but again, we want to keep this thing about the same size as the other side. So constantly compare what you've made to what's already there. Now, what we want to do on this top part of the muscle, you can see up here it's going to be round and sort of curved, but the top, we want to kind of pinch this out. Again, that pectoral muscle, that sort of sweeps in and connects to the top of the arm. A lot of the reason why this is the muscle you work out when you bench press, when you do a push-up, things like that, is that this muscle really governs a lot of the movement of the arm. We want to kind of make it look a little bit like I guess a word bubble from a cartoon, or almost a giant teardrop. But what we want to do is make sure that the center of this here is sort of straight up and down, that the belly of this thing kind of matches the belly of the other side, and then the top of it over here kind of sweeps into the bicep. And again, the top of this muscle really kind of connects to like your collarbone, so you can kind of think about that along those lines, that nothing is a straight line geometric on a human body, but you want to kind of keep to those ideals over there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mess around with this just a little bit to kind of get it as symmetrical as I can. And I don't want to overly blend the two pieces together, because then I lose the sort of like muscle definition. What I do want is down over here where it touches the arm, I'm going to kind of smooth that in a little bit, kind of make that all into one piece. And then I'm going to look from a couple different angles moving my head around this project to make sure that this side kind of looks pretty similar to the other side. And I feel pretty decent about it right now. All right, now I'm going to take one more piece of full-size, dime-sized clay. All right, this is now going to be the deltoid. So I'm going to slowly start flattening that out just a little bit. This is almost going to be like the eyeball when we made the eyeball way back when. All right, we don't want to flatten this out too much, but the shape we're going for is basically like a sunflower seed or a teardrop. So I'm going to slowly build this into sort of a teardrop shape. I want to kind of rough fit it and see what it looks like to start with. You know that I have the other one on the other side. The other one on the other side really got blended into the body. This is the muscle on top of your shoulder. This really helps with the rotation of your arm. This helps you raise your hand. Scratch your head. This is really the muscle belly that governs all that, and it connects really your shoulder, your neck, and your arm together. So we want to kind of come up with that sort of teardrop type shape. All right, flat on the bottom side, still rounded on the top. We want that to overlap onto the shoulder and the arm. We don't want it to just be on the arm. You can see where I'm placing it right now. And then what we want to do is we really do want to kind of press this in and get it really sort of connected with the rest of the body, especially that shoulder girdle. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of smooth that out. Pick it up from the back side and make sure it sort of connects in on the back side as well. Blending that in. Trying to keep everything that I do relatively symmetrical. I want to keep everything looking like, it's the same on both sides. So if you really feel at one point you're working right now, something looks lopsided or looks way too heavy on one side and the other, now's the time to make an adjustment and change it. Now the top part of this muscle over here by the shoulder, I'm going to smooth into the shoulder. All right, over here I can kind of leave a little bit of that definition. That's okay because that's going to get covered up a little bit. I'm going to look at it and try to make sure that it sort of matches the other side. So if I have to reform the muscle a little bit, that's fine. And I'm going to look that it's connected in the back again as well, and we're pretty good. Now, there's going to be a little bit more clay that I add to this, and I'm going to do that right now. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one dime-sized piece of clay. All right, once again, another dime-sized piece of clay. And this one I am going to divide in half. Make sure I have relatively similar two halves. Roll them back up into balls. And then I'm going to divide the halves into half. I'm going to kind of pinch them into two. So I have two much smaller pieces. So from one dime-sized piece of clay, I'm going to take the other half that I made. Obviously, it's bigger than the other two. And I'm going to divide that one in half as well. So from one dime-sized piece of clay, I'm expecting to make 4 smaller balls out of that. So these are really, really sort of tiny. Best way to do this is to make your little dime pieces of clay. From this, we made these. All right, now a couple of them, one of them is a little bit on the small side, but I think I'll be okay with the rest. All right, for this, we are going to make some of the other parts of the deltoids that connect the chest to the shoulder to the back. So what we're going to do is we're going to roll these out. Now roll these out. And what we want is, we want a short little piece like what I've just made over here, maybe only a couple of fingers thick. And we're going to go on the edges of those, and we're going to just kind of pinch in the edges a little bit. The edges are thinner, and we got this sort of like fat muscle belly in the middle. This first one needs to become part of what is the front deltoid. It's going to sweep in from the front part of that deltoid on top of your bicep, and it's going to sweep into your chest. And so this is one major muscle tendon connector that sort of, again, really helps reconnect the chest with the arm. I'll take that little muscle belly that we've created. The first front part of it, the thin part, we're going to mush that right in. Okay? It's okay if you could still see sort of the separation of that muscle fiber as we're working. And then up here in the top, we're going to kind of sweep that in to what was our deltoid. And again, we're going to try the best we can to keep things symmetrical. Keeping things symmetrical will be the biggest challenge of this. It's not an easy thing to do to make both sides match. They won't be perfect, but your job is to make them close. All right, so that is that sort of front deltoid. Now we're going to go back, flip this guy over. We'll go to the rear, and we're going to go to the same sort of thing. We're going to do the rear deltoid. I haven't put too many muscles in the back just yet. I'm going to add a few more later. But just the way we're working, it's not that convenient to do because it's going to constantly be getting smushed together. Roll out a short piece, maybe about the thickness of 2 fingers. Go ahead and use your fingers to sort of thin out those ends. And again, this one is going to wrap around from like the thin part from like the middle of your shoulder all the way to that bottom part of that deltoid. It's going to kind of lay on top of your tricep. Again, we're going to mush that part into the body. That's going to be our real connector. And we're going to kind of keep the rest of it relatively full and keep that definition in the body. So I'm just going to blend in this bottom part over here. So that's my rear deltoid. And this is going to be the muscle that kind of helps us pick up things. If you're swimming, it's a big part of the equation. Well, I'm going to spend just a second or two to kind of work on my symmetry and sort of blend some things together. I got one more little piece of clay. I'm going to make one more little muscle belly. I'll roll my finger out there, not too long, maybe about almost two fingers worth, and then just really thin the edges. So I have this little fat belly and the little thin sides. This is going to be part of my trap muscle, and that trap muscle goes right up into the neck and right on top of my deltoid. So I'm going to go ahead and mush that in. Push that all in. I'm going to keep it symmetrical. I'm not going to go all the way up the neck with it and use it to kind of cover that space. So that's going to be that trap muscle. If you've ever held a grocery bag or your backpack and it's hanging down at the side, it's your trap muscle that takes a lot of that weight, holds the weight of your arm, and helps you again with lifting things up off the ground. I'll go ahead and play with that a little bit. But right now what we should see is the upper part of the body, our chest, our shoulders, and our biceps and triceps. They should be done. You should see pretty much a little bit more than the size of the bicep. It should be the amount of wire sticking out over there. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to finish up those arms. And then we're going to start working on the legs. And this is what we're looking at. All right, ladies and gentlemen, take your time. Look at your work from different angles. Symmetry is really important. Not wasting clay. Again, we're working with dime-sized pieces of clay. Don't make yours, if they're a little bit bigger, it's important that they're all at least the same size. But don't go out there and make them too big. Don't make them quarter size. You'll end up wasting a lot of clay for no apparent reason. And that was finishing the shoulders and the chest.